Okay, so today the TELL interest group of CATISO is happy to welcome Brent Warner, who is the co-chair of the ESL department and the online education committee at Imperial Valley campus. Sorry, at Irvine Valley.
The other IVC.
I'm in San Diego, right? I just wrote IVC.
You're muted.
Sorry. He is also the co-host of a podcast about technology in ESL, which is called Diesel Podcast, spelled DIESOL, and he is also the host of a website called AIandESL.com, and he's going to talk with us about that a little bit later in his session. So without further ado, Brent, I'll go ahead and hand the meeting over to you. Thank you very much for being here.
All right. Thank you so much. Good morning, everybody. I hope everybody's doing well. It's nice to see some familiar names and or faces. So hello, everyone. Hi, Wayna. Good to see you too. All right. So thank you so much, everybody, for joining. I know this is a big topic right now, and so we'll do our best to kind of cover as much as we can. Just to point out, before we get started with anything, you know, this whole conversation is so brand new. Please be careful about people who claim to know everything that's going on or to have all the answers. I certainly do not, but I'm exploring with them. I'm trying to figure out what's as best as I can, and so so we'll all work together to get this sorted as close as we can. So today we're talking about artificial intelligence in the ESL classroom, in ESL the classroom. I guess I have my own writing errors going on right away. So here we go. As was mentioned, my name is Brent Warner. We'll get to any questions or things that you want to clarify in the future. But today we're going to be talking about some reactions to ChatGPT and AI. And we're going to be also talking about using it directly in the classroom.
My CATISO organization is muted. Somebody help.
Sorry, Michael, you're asking for... Michael, can you hear us?
Okay. I think he's having a problem with the audio, but nobody else is.
Okay. I'm going to let you guys work on that. I'll jump forward.
Michael, you might want to jump off and jump back on again.
I don't think he can hear us, so so we might need to text message him. Okay, so I'm going to move forward. So today, like I said, we're going to be talking about reactions, and we're going to be talking about using it in the classroom. Next time, for part 2, we'll be looking at using it in the office so that we can kind of understand the back end, like how we can use it as teachers in preparation as we're setting up for our work. So today we're going to get started by looking at general reactions to ChatGPT. A lot of my colleagues have had similar reactions, so let's take a look here. Perhaps you had this type of reaction when you first started seeing these bots coming out. So if you remember that reaction from Terminator 2 when Sarah Connor first encounters the Terminator, she is scared, she wants to run away, she wants to escape all of this, and fairly so, right? She has you know, some very legitimate concerns around this thing. And so when I first saw it, this is a reaction that I saw quite a lot. Sorry, this always wants to replay. So I know this language is a little bit forced, but I'm running with it anyways. So the general responses in exhausted faculty. Grief, the grief that we're going through around understanding how this technology works, around kind of recognizing that it is absolutely coming into our classrooms and into our teaching practices. And so the first reaction I've seen from a lot of teachers is denial, right? No, this isn't that good, or this isn't, this isn't going to be a big game changer. It's kind of similar to a lot of the other technologies we've seen and worried about, and yeah, nothing, right? So there's been some denial. Then we've seen people go through anger, right? How dare students even think about using this type of stuff, right? There's lots of the plagiarism conversation coming up around this, right? People are concerned about whether students are going to be plagiarizing. Secret, yes, and secret, they always have been. So don't, it's not one thing or another, right? Like it exists in there. And so the conversations around that do need to change a bit. I am not going to be talking a lot about plagiarism. That is its own conversation, but it's its own conversation. Bargaining. So, well, maybe this part's okay, maybe that part's not okay. We'll work with this. I'm gonna say this and this and this, whatever. But mostly I'll kind of turn away from this. Depression. Is my job gone? Is everything over? Is the world going to change so much that I cannot possibly survive in it? What will I do? Oh no. And then, of course, acceptance. And so, okay, I see that this is part of our life. I see that this is going to be part of everything from here on out. How do I, start working with it? Now, remember, just like with real grief, there's no one spot that you perfectly move through and go from beginning to end. All of these are stages that you cycle back through at different levels as you're going. And so some days I feel like I'm in the acceptance stage, and other days I definitely feel like I'm in the denial, or all the way back, denial and anger stages and everywhere in between. So the first thing I think that's most important is that everybody kind of recognize that your perspective on this is absolutely legitimate. So if you're worried about these things, if you're excited about these things, wherever you are kind of in the spectrum of these, I do want to make sure that that's totally fine, because it is a disrupting technology and we don't understand everything that's happening here. So so this is kind of the big idea that I want to make sure everybody has a feeling that, hey, I might be opposed to this, okay, but am I open-minded to just see what's going on with it? Maybe I can get a couple of ideas, or maybe I'm totally into this. How can I start using it? So hopefully we can get a chance to discuss all of these. So what is our job as educators? When we kind of take off the ESL lens that we look through everything with, we really do need to kind of understand the bigger picture of things and how all of this is connecting. And so it is our job, regardless of what field we teach in, it's our job as educators to prepare students for a future that doesn't exist, right? And so we need to be extra careful about that, because if we're really thinking about that, we cannot sit around and hide technology from our students. I know that there's a lot of people out there that are like, oh, well, I'm just going to not allow it, or, these kind of conversations are going on, or maybe I'll just go back to paper and pencil work in my classroom, and that's how we'll solve the problem. But that is not really helping your students recognize that they're stepping forward into a new world. And so I want to be a little bit careful about that approach. Although, as I said, I do understand it, but I want to be careful about that as well. And so I did an interview on one of our podcasts with my colleague, Rebecca Beck, and I really like the way that she put this. She said, we need to work with the students we have and not the student I was. And I think that is a big mindset shift for a lot of people, because they say, well, I came up this way and this is what happened, and everything turned out fine for me, so it should be okay. And yes, that is true. And there's definitely a lot of value to pull from our own educational experiences. And we need to kind of keep pushing it forward and recognizing, okay, it's not the same thing as it was 20 years ago, 10 years ago, 5 years ago, 5 months ago. This is a big change we're really looking at. And so I want to make sure that we're kind of all thinking about that from that perspective. So what is our responsibility? Well, here's the truth.
Come with me if you want to live.
So if you want to survive in this world, you're going to have to figure out what's going on with the AI. You're going to have to embrace it at some level, even if you don't like it, even if you're scared of it. We are never going to go back to a world where AI isn't integrated into almost every single part of our lives. It's only going to become more and more ubiquitous. And so are we going to try to take the hand of it? Are we going to try and figure out what's going on, or are we going to bat it away and try and do our own things? So I do make this claim that is the somewhat bold claim that we actually have a moral imperative to teach our students about things like ChatGPT, artificial intelligence, whatever it is. We are doing them a disservice if we don't actively go in and start talking to them about what they're doing, about how it can help them, but also about how it can do them disservices in their learning processes. And that can include language learning, of course, as well. So we want to kind of understand that part of our work here is about helping students understand how to move forward. So I do think that it's important to get curious about these tools. And so if you remember this scene here in Terminator 2 as well, there's this moment where John Connor starts to go, oh, well, hold on a second. What is this thing? Let me start playing with it. He's poking it in the face and like, what's going to happen here? And so it is really a big change for us to say, well, okay, now I'm going to open this up and I'm going to start looking at what the possibilities here are. So we are going to do a little bit of exploring in a moment, but I want to look at a couple of examples of how people are using AI in innovative ways. Now, this is not an ESL conversation right here. This is just kind of understanding the bigger picture of what we're starting to see in AI. So let's look at a couple of those things first. This one I'll keep brief. A colleague of mine, a friend of mine's husband has started playing with some voice control using ChatGPT. And so this is his first experiment, and I'll only show about 1 minute of this, maybe less.
Hello, everybody. So I just wanted to make a quick video. It's probably going to be a little helter-skelter because I'm exhausted and stuff, but I just got this to work and I'm really excited. So I'll try and demonstrate. Pit Girl can now respond to questions. Any question, pretty much. So if we start a voice attack, I can ask it, and the dictation might be a little rough. So let's see if she gets it right. Pit Girl, let me ask you a question.
What would you like to ask?
Why is the sky blue?
I heard. Why is
So
the
she
sky
echoes
blue?
it out to the Twitch chat. She says it.
The sky is
And
blue
then
because
we
of
get a
the way
response.
sunlight interacts with the atmosphere. Sunlight is made up.
Okay, so you can start to see what people are already starting to play with. And by the way, this is just some guy who's a hobbyist, right? So some of the professionals out there, we're already seeing the companies. This was a month ago. Now these companies are coming out with faster, quick, immediate responses on connecting to these AI systems to be able to give you much more thorough responses that tie into ChatGPT or other large language models. So this is kind of taking Alexa, for example, to the next level. Okay, let's look at the next use case we saw here. So some kid out there figured out a way to so teachers are saying, well, we're going to move our things to paper. So a kid figured out a way to program his 3D printer to write his paper on with a pen on the piece of paper, and then he put in his ChatGPT prompt and then had it write out what he was getting at with this. So the 3D printer did the homework, ChatGPT wrote it. This student in my class gets an A just because that's amazing. You know, like this is a really interesting understanding of saying, oh, well, now we're starting to combine these different points together, and we're starting to see how different technologies can come. But the conversation around, okay, well, I'm just going to make students hand write things. I mean, you know, it's not going to be valuable for very long. This is next one up is a brand new technology. So if you remember this scene from Terminator 2, so he's scanning and you kind of see what's going on. He's scanning this guy to see what size clothes he's wearing. And so just a couple of days ago, this came out, and this is from Meta, Facebook. And so let's take a quick look at how similar this is. So they're moving the camera around, and you can see that it's identifying the items inside of there just as he moves the camera around. Let me play that for you one more time because it kind of goes by quickly. So it's recognizing coffee table, board games, book, stack of books, suitcase handle, suitcase, etc. So this technology, which was very science fiction, you know, a short time ago, is now a direct reality that's integrated into everyday. So so this can be pretty wild for a lot of people to look at. And then I want to just jump into the full combination here. So I want to see what this combination of technology looks like.
In about 10 minutes, I created a speaking animated character with background music generated by AI and subtitles, and the script was generated by AI. All of it was done with AI. In this video, I'm going to show you exactly how I did it.
All right, I'll take over from here. The first step is to create your character. Riley used Midjourney to create me. This is the prompt that he used, and notice the Q2 at the end. This is a parameter that creates a higher quality image. Once he had the image, he needed the words. He went to ChatGPT and wrote, "Rewrite the man in the arena, but make it satire on how being the man in the arena is actually lame and stupid." That took 1 minute. Then he went to Well Said Labs to generate the voice. This software is a little expensive, but just look up free text to voice websites and test them until you find a good one. Simply paste the text in and get audio out. Then with the audio file, he went to a new platform. This platform is DID.com. Simply select the image of a person and select the audio track and then click Generate. And finally, he went to Ava, where you can download AI-generated music. For intense dialogue, he likes to use synthwave, and on the first try, he got a great track. And now to put it all together. On Premiere Pro or any editing software, drag in the video of the man speaking, drag in the music, and make it quieter. Generate subtitles, and boom, done. No, the true hero is the one who avoids the arena altogether, content to live a peaceful and unremarkable life.
Okay, so you can see here, this guy made this whole video, this whole thing in 10 minutes, right? And so this is amazing. And I wanted to test this out for myself. And so I'll show you another version.
In about 10 minutes, I created...
This is me doing basically the same thing with myself here. So I did deep fake myself. I won't make you watch the entire thing, but let's take a look at what happens here. And well, I'll give you the disclaimer afterward.
Hey folks, so let's talk about verb tenses in English. I know they can be a bit of a pain to learn, but trust me, it's worth the effort. First of all, understanding verb tenses allows you to communicate more clearly. When you're speaking or writing in English,
okay, I'm not going to force you through all of that, but you can get a sense of what's going on here. Now, the part that everybody obviously sees is like, oh, well, you know, like there's AI going on in your face, your beard isn't moving, there's weird things happening in the visuals, which is true, right? So this is, I broke the rules on this. You're supposed to be frontward facing, and I kind of have, this is my semi-professional picture. And this is playing with that. But also just going to point out the voice is not my voice. That's not me speaking. That is artificially intelligence generated voice through the same process that the previous video showed through a lab called 11 Labs. And also the text itself is not written by me. It was written by ChatGPT in order to get there. Now, what I did is I prompted it to kind of do a slightly informal style, to add ums in here every once in a while to feel more natural. And it did do that. So now understanding also that in addition to the video, the voice is not mine and the words are not mine. I'm just going to do one more quick play of the same segment here.
Hey folks, so let's talk about verb tenses in English. I know they can be a bit of a pain to learn, but trust me, it's worth the effort. First of all, understanding verb tenses allows you to communicate more clearly. When you're speaking or writing in English, using the
okay, so you start to get the idea here of what's possible. So some of the first conversations are things like, oh, well, I'll just make students record videos of themselves doing these instead so that I know that it's them doing their work. It's not going to last, right? All of these reactionary responses are going to continue to be problematic. And so we do need to start shifting our thinking into, well, instead of how do I block these things, how do I police them, how do I do these, how do I start working with my students to help our students then move forward with their learning. And so this is a lot of what we want to talk about here.
Hey folks,
today.
so
all right, so today we're going to be looking at ChatGPT with your students. And we can look at, by the way, other services as well. So just to mention that there's Bard out there, which is the Google version, and there's Bing, which is basically ChatGPT just pulled into excuse me, into Microsoft. And so you can get access to all of these things in different ways. I'm going to start with the ChatGPT conversation, and I'm going to very highly encourage you to actually open up your own ChatGPT, maybe get access to it while I'm talking so that you can actually play with it. And we'll do a short breakout in about 15 minutes or so. So that you can play with it and see what's going on. But I do want to start with just looking at some of the possibilities of ways that you can work with ChatGPT. So for our classes, we can do all sorts of things with it, and we'll look at some direct examples in a moment. But you can do things like making examples. So you can ask students can ask ChatGPT to create examples of complete assignments, and a lot of times this can be a good Kickstarter. So often we will, as teachers, provide them with a sample text or exemplary work that they can use for their work in the future, and so they can actually use ChatGPT or these text generators to do similar types of things. They can also do self-analyses. So one of the ways that I had it the very first day in January of class, I had my students jump in, they're writing their paper, and then I put their work into ChatGPT, and I asked ChatGPT to analyze their work. And so I set it up the prompt, and I tried to cut and paste their papers into it, and then I gave the ChatGPT response back to the student, and I asked them to look at what is ChatGPT saying about your work, and what do you think it's getting right, and what do you think it's getting wrong? Because there is a big conversation about, hey, there's accuracy problems, there are things that it's missing, there are things that it sounds confident but it's not actually right. And so then we were able to analyze it, and because the students are intrinsically motivated because it's their own work and they want to see what's going on with it, they were actually spending a lot of time looking at it. And they said, well, this is what I wrote, this is what it said was good, this is what it said was bad, but actually it made a mistake here. So for example, one of the students asked it to check their capitalization, and it said, oh, well, the student had capitalized the H in homework, and ChatGPT actually gave them praise for it. It said, oh, good job capitalizing this word. And it's like, well, actually that shouldn't have been capitalized. It was, it's just an object at the end of the sentence. And so they wanted to figure that out, and they were able to use it as a way to play with how smart the technology is, and then to see whether or not they could fully trust it, which is an important part of introducing this to your students. students, right? It's to say, hey, let's look at this. Let's see what is working. Let's see what isn't working. Let's see what parts of this we want to trust and what parts we don't. Next up, you can stylize the work. So one thing that can make things interesting for students is converting information into rap battles. That's been popular, one of the first ones that came up. So you could say, hey, take this same idea, put it into a rap battle, into a poem, into a screenplay, and then you can do the same conversation where you can say, well, let's take a look. If you're turning this into a rap, for example, it's going to, by default, eliminate a lot of the information. So what details do you think, if you're trying to look at these two characters and understand them and they're having a rap battle, what parts of the information that you put into this are now missing, for example? You can also do debates. So you can have conversations with ChatGPT and have it take one side of the argument and ask it to take the opposite side. And you can also use it to get clarification for unclear ideas. So I think the important thing here is to actually look at this. So let's get right into it. So this is ChatGPT. And I'm going to throw in a couple of starting language issues. So I'm going to start with this one that I've been trying to play with, which is just a dialogue back and forth conversation with it that students can use. So I'm starting it simple, and I'm putting in this text, which is, imagine you're a barista at Starbucks and I'm a customer. You will try to upsell me on sizes and pastries, but maintain a friendly tone. You will not provide a dialogue, but only speak on the role of the barista and wait for me to respond. Let's chat. Now, just to be clear, I've tried versions of this prompt a couple of times, and it always seems to want to go into giving me the full dialogue instead of just taking the one role. So sometimes I have to clarify it, but you can play with these prompts and then figure out ways that you're going to give them to your students, and then they can cut and paste them and put them into their work. So I'll start with this one. Okay, so look what it's doing. See, it's already trying to give me the answers here. So I'm going to tell it, no, please only play the role of the barista. So, okay, so this is where it seems to get it on the second entry here. So I apologize for the confusion. Sure thing. What can I get for you today? So here, you can start having the real conversation where students can practice these things. So I'm going to say, I want a latte. And so now it's going to do the upselling opportunity for the students, right? So great choice. What would you like? What size would you like your latte? We offer tall, grande, and venti sizes. How much is a tall? Okay, so it's going to give me this because it's not choosing a specific spot. So I'll say one tall latte, please. And of course, you can play with them and have them cut and paste. So in this case, if you were doing punctuation and I forgot to put the comma after latte, you could talk with your students about that, etc. Now it's going to continue with the conversation. Hot, please, no whipped cream. No, thank you. So I'm keeping this fairly short right now, but you can start to see what's going on. So I'm going to say, I don't have any money. And so you can see here, any reactions that the person puts into it, it is going to be able to figure this out. Can I have it for free? Etc. So you can have some real fun with this. You can play with it and set up different parameters. Now, Starbucks is kind of an obvious and easy option for this, but you can start playing with this. So for example, last week in my class, or not last week, sorry, it was Tuesday, I had my students going through this and they're like, well, I'm interested in buying a house. And so I said, well, let's put it into the role of a real estate agent. And what are the questions that you would want to be asking it? And what would you want to start figuring out? So this is my my adult ESL class. And so then they did, and they started going into having conversations. And then it was opening up questions for the students, because the first thing the real estate agent said, well, one, what's your budget? And two, what type of house would you like to live in? Single family unit, a townhouse, or a condo, right? And then my students are like, well, what's the difference between all of these things? And I said, why don't you ask? And then they did, and they were able to get that feedback directly from it. Now, the thing that was really powerful about this for me is that we know that the pedagogy says the faster you get the feedback, the quicker you are going to be able to learn and you know, keep the information and keep the knowledge in your head, right? And so one of the big things that's always been a problem for students is, well, class is over on Thursday, and then, you know, bye teacher, I'll see you next Tuesday. And if I don't have, and if I have questions on anything in between, then maybe I'm stuck, right? Maybe I just have to wait until Tuesday and I'll forget about it. So now they live in a world where they can get answers and they can get responses absolutely right away, which is unbelievable. And it, you know, it's a quite incredible thing for students to get. Now for us, a lot of times we might be having our students dealing with you know, grammar issues and language issues. And so they can go right in here and ask it to teach them grammar points. So I'm an English language learner. I'm trying to understand. Anybody want to drop in the chat something that one of your students is trying to learn about right now? We'll let you guys throw in your work here, or what you're working with. Okay. How sticky was first? Sorry, guys. Sorry, everybody else who's trying. How to form comparatives. Modals. All of these are good choices. So just going to start right with that. And here's what it's coming up with. Sure, I'd be happy to help you understand. In English, comparatives are used to compare two things with such and such, right? For adjectives with one syllable, add ER to the adjective form of the comparative. For example, big becomes bigger, fast becomes faster, etc. With that, and it goes on to give some of these examples. So then I might say, this is too complicated. Can you make it easier? And it is going to simplify it for them. So it's just saying, yes, add ER with one syllable, add more with more than two syllables. Now, we know that that's not perfectly right. Obviously, we have our exceptions and all of those things. But as a starting point with very basic prompting, students can go in and get a lot of really good information. They can get themselves started, and then they can use this, and then they can follow up with you later. So there's definitely a lot of points in here that they can play with. Christy, yeah, okay, so this is a good point. So Christy is saying that she asked it to make a quiz on collocations with make and do, and half of them were wrong. Absolutely. So I want to be careful that this is not something to totally trust from the beginning to the end. That is a big part of the conversation here, is that we want to understand. So for us as discipline experts, we can look at it and go, oh, this is wrong, this is right, and we're pretty good at it. The students might not so much. And so this is why you really do early on need to say, hey, be careful of what you're trusting in here, which, by the way, is the same conversation we have if they have access to Grammarly or, you know, anything else. It's not always going to be accurate, but it is going to help them out or get them started with a lot of things. I'll also point out too that the GPT-3 and 3.5 are have a lot more mistakes. When you move into GPT-4, I'm paying for the upgraded version, but if you move into ChatGPT-4, it does do a better job, although it is a bit slower. I'm not going to use it right now because it's a lot slower, but it's much more accurate with the information. Okay, so one more thing that I want to show is in my class right now, we're doing reading assignments, and we're reading, in my academic writing class, we're reading Fahrenheit 451. And so one of the activities that I'm having my students do in their reading circles is they're going to start creating dialogues together with characters, imagining that they are Montag and that, that they're talking to one of the characters from the book. And so I'm going to just drop in kind of one of the samples that we might have. So I'm saying, I'm playing the role of Montag from the novel Fahrenheit 451. You will play the role of Faber. Let's have a discussion about the state of the world where you give me more thoughts and insights about what's happening. You will only speak as Faber and wait for me to respond. And so you can do that. So I might say, what's on your mind? And I say, tell me about the hound who invented it? So for those of you who remember this book, it can kind of get into it, and it says the mechanical hand was invented by the government to help maintain blah, 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 right? The primary purpose was to enforce the government's laws and suppress dissent. It was created by a team of government scientists and engineers who designed it to be nearly indestructible and highly efficient at its job. So it does know what's going on inside of that book, and it's trying to help. And so for this, my goal is that my students are going to look at it and use it as supplemental learning to understand what's going on. And when they can say, hey, now I'm talking to this character, now I'm kind of see what they see and what they understand, that can be a real opportunity for students to build up. Now I'll tell you, as I was playing with it, I asked it questions about Clarice, and it started giving me answers. And I said, well, as Faber, for those familiar with the book, as Faber, you should not know who Clarice is. Those are two separate characters that do not interact with each other. And so it did give me information about Clarice, and I said, and so it's not always going to be perfect there, but it's still going to get you a lot of really interesting insights. And then I'm going to be asking my students, hey, let's see what you're getting out of this. What are you learning that's deeper from the book? Maybe things about what's happening inside of the government, maybe how these technologies developed, whatever that they want to learn to get more insights into what's going on. Last one here, I'm just going to show briefly, but I just found this on LinkedIn. I didn't make this, but someone made a very sophisticated prompt, and I'll show you it here. So basically they made a text adventure game that's going on. And so it's playing in the mansion, and you can play this role of trying to sort out where this treasure is, right? So it says, welcome to this manor, you're in the foyer. This is almost, if you remember, why am I pull Zork? Is it Zork? Some of those early text games that you could play. And so I'm going to say, go to the fireplace, right? And then it'll tell me you cannot go to the fireplace as part of the foyer. However, there's a parlor. Okay, go to the parlor. And anyways, it'll start setting it up, and students can start looking at it and playing these games. And by the way, you could set parameters around these games with things like verb tenses. They have to be able to explain things clearly in this verb tense and that verb tense. Now this gets much more advanced, but we're just trying to look at what some of these possibilities are. Okay, last thing I want to share before we go into some breakout rooms. I'm going to swap here from, let me pause the share, hold on. I'm going to swap here from ChatGPT to over to Bing. And so Bing now has the image creator, which is powered by DALL-E. And so you can have it create different pictures and different images inside of here. So I'm going to create, actually, I'll ask you guys, someone want to give me something that they want me to prompt it with to develop a picture of. So I'll give you just 30 seconds. We'll see what comes up here. While we're waiting for that. Is that not coming through? Oops, sorry. I'm sorry. My mistake. Hold on. Now I'm sharing the screen. Sorry. Thank you. Thank you, Susan. Okay. Yes, I do have concerns about anthropomorphizing these systems. So I don't say that. When I say, hey, imagine you're talking with someone, right? You're playing the role of. When I talk with my students about it, I do talk about it in terms of it and the bots. It's a little bit tricky inside of here. Okay, so let's see. Let's just do, okay, so I'm seeing a landscape in the novel Holes. Well, I'm going to give it an actual prompt here to play with. So, so when I put it in, I'm going to say, give me a landscape of a desert that has a lot of holes in it. Please make the style cartoony, I'll say, just for fun. So here's what it's going to do. It's going to take a minute or so. This is definitely slower than the chat ones because it's generating an entire image based out of this as you go. but it can go and create some sort of image like that. Okay, so filled with a bunch of holes, etc. Now, one of the ways that I am playing with this with my students is I'll give them a picture. So I might bring up an image of something famous, so maybe the Mona Lisa, for example, and then I'll ask them to try to describe the Mona Lisa with their language skills, right? How many skills do you have around this? And then they'll try to describe it as best as they can. So let's go here first and look at the actual Mona Lisa to make sure that we're describing her well. Okay, so I'm going to say maybe something along the lines of a woman with brown hair in a black blouse in front of a landscape. I'll kind of keep it simple. A woman with brown hair and wearing a black dress sitting in front of a landscape. She is slightly smiling. I'm not going to put in Mona Lisa, of course. I'm just trying to get the students to actually play with a descriptive language so that they can start seeing how close they can get these types of tools to come up with it. Okay, so it it kind of looks like a huge, I mean, this is a photorealistic, almost photorealistic version. So I'll say, make it an oil painting. So one more time, we'll see if it comes out any different. As it develops, you might be interested in signing yourself up. I'm not sure if Bing is open for everybody. I had to sign up and wait a couple of days. Okay, so it's starting to get a little bit closer. And then again, you can ask your students to fine tune all the way through, right? Let's work on this. Let's really get these closer together. Where should she be positioned inside of this, etc. So there's a lot of different things you can play with. And then this is for them. They're not even thinking that they're working on descriptive language, right? They're just like, oh, I'm just playing with this tool and figuring it out. But at the same time, they're actively having to figure out the language that they need to better get it clarified. And then you can have the whole class show their different versions, and you can do a comparison of like which was the best prompt, why was it in there, what language was being used, etc. So there's definitely a lot of interesting and fun things to play around with here. With that, I do want to go just share one last part. Let me swap back to our screen here, which I do think is very important, which is custom content. So published textbooks take so long to come out, right? And I still, well, actually, we're not right now, but within the last couple of years, I still had textbooks that would ask things like, do you know what the World Wide Web is? You know, these kind of embarrassing questions that shouldn't be in textbooks, but still for some reason they are. But what you can do with these things is you can actually get it to totally customize content for your students in the setting of the world that they live in. So you can actually ask them to say, hey, create content, tell me about the history of, you know, in my case, Irvine, right? And it'll give me content all around Irvine that then I can start having my students interact with and using. The reason this came up was because I did a presentation up in the Salinas Valley, and we said, well, all textbook content is kind of about like Los Angeles and New York City and London, as though those are the only places where people live, which is, you know, as we know, that's not the reality. And so students that live in other settings might not feel themselves represented very well by texts. And so what you can do here is you can give them opportunities to build contexts that are familiar and comfortable to the student in order to learn the same type of content. We'll talk more about this in the next month's presentation about building all of these things, but I wanted to kind of give an opening here to just see it a little bit. All right, so with that, what I would really like for you to do, I want to make sure that everybody has a little chance to talk about it and maybe play with it, I hope. So I want to put people into breakout rooms for, sorry, I went a little longer than I thought, but a little less than 10 minutes. We'll put you into some breakout rooms, and I want you to, one, ideally, try to sign into some of these services. Try to play with them. One of you can share the screen, see what's going on, see what kind of responses you get, what things work, what things don't work. It's not always going to be just like this magically perfect thing. You have to kind of play with it. And then two, if you're not able to or not ready to log in for it, you can certainly share your thoughts on how some of these tools might be used inside of your classroom, or how you might adapt them and change them to your classroom needs. So I'm going to make some just random breakout groups. Let's do about we'll do 3 to 4 people per room, so you can chat with each other. And we'll come back in about 7 or 8 minutes. All right, let's go. This is random, so here we go. Oops. All right. Welcome back, everybody, as you're returning. I know it's never enough time when you're getting into the good conversations, and then the Zoom chops you off. So sorry if you're right in the middle of a good thought, but hopefully you'll have a chance to continue to follow up with each other. So I do want to give a couple of minutes here at the end. The room is smarter than the individual, and so are there any questions, comments, ideas, concerns? I mean, there should be lots of these things, but if there's anything that people wanted to share that they came up with during their chats, or questions that that might have bubbled up during the presentation, I'd certainly be happy to try to answer and do our best to get at least a couple thoughts going here.
Yeah, I'm going to recommend people maybe use the Zoom reaction to raise their hands if they want to speak, or type something into chat. Yep.
Perfect.
We're getting a few questions. Oh, so David, do you want to go ahead and ask your question?
Yeah, so thanks a lot for this presentation, Brent. Really interesting. I wonder though, you were using the Bing engine to create images, and all that stuff is scraped off of other artists' work. Just wondering, do you have conversations about, what's the word I'm looking for?
The ethics of it.
The ethics of
copyright.
Yeah, copyright, exactly. That's what I'm
Yeah, we do. So to me, it's important to bring up those conversations that, hey, this is I don't know what the laws are going to come, right? There are no laws at this moment, right? It's all kind of being sorted out. We can say that hey, there are problems inside of here, and we want to understand that. I think, and the truth is, this one here, David, the Dolly version, is probably the most guilty of it. What I'm actually asking my students to use is Canva right now. The Canva one is not very good, frankly, but it's a lot more like, hey, it seems to be a little bit more ethically sourced from what I'm understanding. I'm not totally sure about that, but I do bring up the conversation and kind of help students understand what's going on with those things. But it is a very big, massive, there's tons of lawsuits going on around that right now, and so it's a tricky conversation for sure. But you can also say like, hey, really, let's do simplified versions. So if you say, hey, I don't want it to pull from those things, let's do stick figures or basic icons, and you can kind of push it for that if you're concerned about like, hey, I don't want to impede on people's artistic rights and skills, which I absolutely understand. Amanda.
Thank you so much for your presentation. And I'm curious, I've heard the explanation of some of the about the language models and things like that make these, and I still feel like I don't quite totally get it. And I'm wondering, how much do you bring that into the conversation? How much should we know? Also, what burden does this place on teachers to stay adapted to this, to be like knowing these, how much do we have to tell our students? Like, do we all have to become like I know we don't all have to become computer science experts, that can explain deep learning and the nodes and all that.
Yeah. So I'll work backwards. So number one, I guess I'm not, from my perspective, I'm not thinking of it as a burden. I'm thinking of it as an opportunity for teachers to really understand what's going to be happening. And so we're still early in that conversation. It is more work for sure, but you know, it's one of those things where we talk about preparing ourselves now so that it's a lighter load in the future. And so that side of it is there. I don't go too deep. You know, my students are not, well, that's not true. Most of my students are not computer scientists, and so they're not going to be particularly interested, or they might be interested in kind of understanding some of the back end of it, but it is very much a black box in terms of how it's pulling the language. I mean, you can go into the data studies and look at how tokens break down and kind of how this is not really words, it's sections or segments of words that are you know, predictive in terms of what's coming out next. And so that conversation is out there, but the truth is, like, that's not what I'm looking for. I'm not trying to teach them AI in the class. I'm trying to teach them language learning processes and opportunities to build. And so I kind of, you know, you have to balance that out for what your students are interested in versus what your goals for the class are. So I do an overview of it, but I don't, you know, this could literally be an entire grad level degree. You know, I mean, really, if you start looking into it. So so it depends on how deep you want to go.
Yeah, and I guess I'm like trying to think about like stripping away, like some people see this and they're like, it's magic, it's writing, and it's like, no, it's the computer algorithm going and doing a really good job of picking out the words. And I guess when I was thinking of burden, you know, it's like I'm teaching at a couple different places, my like employment is precarious, so it's like, well, maybe in a year I won't have any teaching assignments, so to take on extra work, that's I guess what I was thinking about with the burden. It's certainly an exciting topic, but that's not
I understand what you mean by that. So yes, of course it's more work to really figure out what's going on, but I do think it's kind of an investment in your future, I guess, as a teacher as well, and really understanding those points. So but yes, it is very tricky, and there's lots of ups and downs, so that no perfect answers, unfortunately. Amanda, I wish I had something that was very direct for you, but there's going to be a lot of sorting to be done. Gretchen.
Yeah, quick question. How do you compare ChatGPT and Bard?
Yeah, so Bard is, I had it open, I had it kind of ready to go. It's basically got more guardrails on it. It's a lot more limited. And so it's the intention behind those guardrails that are on Bing and are on Bard are to be protective and not get into dark stuff, right? I think, you know, in my case, I'm trying to do things legitimately and with, you know, positive intention. And there's a lot more that I can dig deeper with ChatGPT. And so, but that being said, if you're working with younger kids, you probably would not want them to go into something like that. It's not, I think it's not even allowed for 13 or younger or something like that.
Do you think these sites will be free for a while?
For a little while. Some of these things will be integrated in, so you might get institutional access to some of them. Some of them are currently free with the intention of charging you for them later. You know, this is a lot of processing power, so it does cost money to actually do the stuff. And so you know, it will not always be free, but it will be part of life, I think.
Yeah. Thank you.
Lisa?
Lisa, you're on mute. Are you trying to ask a question?
Yeah. Thank you so much for your presentation. I was wondering, so how do we help students learn how to properly cite when they're using ChatGPT and other AI programs?
Great question.
Whether it's presentation or writing, etc.
Excellent question. Not developed yet. That answer doesn't exist. Like, you can go to MLA and APA and they don't even have the answer yet. I will point out this because I saw a similar question in the chat about like what the expectations are. And so someone is doing these types of things, like at Bryant University, they've got this kind of language and is saying, hey, cite it like this, author generated this text in part with ChatGPT 3, blah, 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 right? So there can be options for those types of things. But I think at the moment you actually kind of have to develop your own system until whatever formatting style that you use comes out with their own official responses to it. It's too early right now.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you. All right, I know we're out of time, and so I apologize. I'll be happy to stick around, but I want everybody who needs to leave to be able to leave. So if you're interested, thank you so much for your time. Diesel.org, that's where we do some podcasting. AI and ESL, if you're interested in actually trying things, because I'll just point out, the people who are talking about this stuff on the internet, very, very, very few of them are actually bringing it into their classroom and actually trying it with their students. And so if you're doing that, and if you want to say, hey, pluses and minuses, and you want to share those, I did build a website kind of recently that is about that, AI and ESL, and I would love contributors. This is not a money-making thing. None of these are these are just us, things that we do for helping our colleagues and our fellow teachers. So if you're interested and you want to share your experiences, these are a couple of places where you can find me and possibly, share out and contribute. Thank you so much for your time. I'm sorry for running over, but I appreciate it. And I'll stick around.
Brent, this was wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing this with us. And I want to remind everyone, Brent is going to be back with CATISOL, TELL-IGI on May 5th. You do need to register for that also if you haven't registered for this. And if you have friends who didn't come to this and they want to come to that, that's fine. He's going to be focusing then on how to use ChatGPT to build lesson plans to help us save time as teachers. So I'm really looking forward to that one too. Everybody, please remember to do the evaluation survey. I'm sorry I put the wrong link in at first, but the correct link is in there now. I'll put it in one more time. Show Brent some love. He was awesome. Okay, and finally, TELL-IGI is also going to be doing Canvas tours, which I know isn't as exciting as ChatGPT, but I'm always looking for new and creative and better ways to make my Canvas courses accessible for my students, like easy for them to find things, appealing. So come along to that and look at some ideas and share some ideas. And if you just give me a moment, I'm going to put that I'm going to put the link to the evaluation in our chat one more time, because we want to see, we want, really everybody, Brent, this was awesome. And I really hope that CATISOL knows and appreciates how awesome it was.
Oh, thank you.
Okay.
Gretchen, I see your hand still up. Was that a follow up or was that from before? Okay, yeah, sorry. No problem. Thanks, everybody. Thank you.
No.
And like I said, I'll stick around a couple more minutes if anybody wants to follow up with one more question, but I think we're clear.
Brent, I did have a question.
Sure.
I was trying to generate, I kind of went to one of the questions in the chat about prompts.
Okay.
I've gotten it to do certain things for me, but I was trying to have it simplify some text. One of the challenges I always have is finding texts that are apt for my lower level students. And so finding, say, like a short story and asking it to simplify it to a certain level. Is that something that's possible? What kind of prompt would
for sure. So so let's say let's say so this is going to go back to David's previous issue of like, hey, what sources are we taking from and whatever else it is. But let's say it's public domain, which I believe Shirley Jackson's The Lottery is public domain. So let's kind of go with that one. So we could say something like post a simplified version, and the word post is important here. So sometimes these keywords, and I'm still learning the prompting, but it will, like, it actually posted the Fahrenheit 451, the book, and just started writing it all out for me. It has a limit in terms of the output, but I'll say something like post a simplified version of Jackson's The Lottery. Please make it Sepher B1 level, maybe, and no more than 1,000 words. I don't know, that's probably too short. We'll see what it comes up with, but okay, so I don't love it right here because it seems to be summarizing instead of actually posting a simplified version of it. So I might keep playing with that as well. So so maybe I would say instead of summarizing, please
simplified text.
Yeah, simplify the original text, maybe something like that. Okay, so it's not going as long as I need it to, but you start getting into it. So you start playing with those, right? So simplify the first 3 pages. I don't know. So I would have to keep playing with it. This is a lot of the learning curve that we're talking about and trying to get this language out, because it won't always do it in the way that you want. And so this, as was mentioned, I think in the prompt or in the chat, is learning how to prompt it is going to be a major skill for a lot of people. And in fact, we're already seeing jobs that are starting to come up with like, hey, excuse me, if you can prompt AI, like prompt it and get it to generate these types of things. So kind of figuring out that side could be there too. Yeah, Susan's,
Is there a place that we can learn, like where it gives you some sample prompts that are effective?
So I am still looking for some. I did see, I was on YouTube the other day and I saw one came up, but I haven't gone in to look at it. If you follow up with an email with me, I can find it a little bit later. So let me give my email. I'm not going to type my email into ChatGPT. Sorry. So if you want to send me an email later, I was looking at it because there seemed to be some websites that are trying to teach people how to prompt, and I haven't quite gotten into them yet, but I do plan to.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Brent. I'm going to stop the recording now.
Sounds good. Thank you.